Will President Trump take a more moderate turn later on in his presidency? The answer is no. That's the short answer. Some people were speculating about this after the 2024 election back in November. I remember one commentator in particular saying, Trump does not have to run for another term. In fact, he can't. He's term limited. He's not going to be president again. So he might be very concerned about his legacy. He might be very concerned about reaching out to the other side, appealing to the broader American electorate, and not just appealing to his most hardcore base of supporters who helped get him elected. And after all, it wasn't only hardcore Trump supporters who voted for him begrudgingly. There were people who were not Trump supporters who voted for him over high prices. They might not have liked him, but they also didn't like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and what their presidency had to offer. So we don't think that this is going to happen. We don't think that this is going to happen here at the More the Merrier. Unfortunately, these first 2 months or so of Trump's presidency have proven that he's extremely far right, that he's really unwilling to negotiate, and that he keeps pushing things further and further to the right. Look at his discourse on free speech. He pretends to be in favor of free speech, which obviously right-wingers love. It's like, and who doesn't love a president who talks about the value of free speech? That's a good thing. We should have a president who talks about it. But he only talks about it from the perspective of the right, from the perspective of the voices I agree with. To him, free speech is about, hey, if I agree with you, you get to speak. If you don't agree with me, you don't get to speak. See his commentary on CNN and MSDNC. He calls MSNBC MSDNC. He called them illegal. He talked about yanking funding from colleges and universities for DEI programs, for talking about their political views. So this is not someone who's moderate. This is someone who is not like dissent whatsoever. Now, he's appointed Pete Hegseth, who's a hardcore loyalist and a hardcore neocon. He's appointed people like Kash Patel, and if there was any possibility of Trump being more moderate, the appointment of Kash Patel to his administration pretty much destroyed that. Now, he has appointed Tulsi Gabbard, and Tulsi Gabbard was a former Democrat. And so I see some right-wingers over on X saying, Trump used to be a Democrat, Tulsi used to be a Democrat, RFK Jr. used to be a Democrat. This isn't some far-right administration. This is just normal people, who recognize that the Democrats are bad. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening here. These are people who are grifters. These are people who didn't really have that much of a core to begin with and saw an opportunity. They saw, hey, okay, the wind is blowing in the Trumpian direction. People are mad about these high prices. And you know what? They also just said, we don't like Democrats. We don't like liberals. There are people who may have purported to have left-wing values, but never really did. They don't like liberals. They don't like centrist Democrats. They feel like they got stabbed in the back by them. They're like, oh, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are bad. They're the deep state. I guess I'm going to support Trump now, even though he's a billionaire and he's the ultimate deep state, he and Elon Musk. So there's no moderation to be found in the fact that Trump has former Democrats in his administration. What about Lori Chavez DeRemer? So she's a pro-labor Republican. Ostensibly, she voted for the PRO Act, one of few Republicans. She's a House of Representatives member from Oregon, a blue state, deep blue state. This state is never going to go red. So she's got some praise from the Democrats. There were some Democrats even who voted for her, and there were some Republicans, such as staunch libertarian Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, who were like, I'm not going to vote for her, that's bad. She doesn't like business, she supports unions, So he didn't vote for her. But again, I think her main concern here is that she wants to promote the Trump agenda, she wants to be a loyalist to Trump, and that standing up for labor unions, standing up for the working class, standing up against big business exploitation and those types of problems, that's something that's mutually exclusive with promoting the Trump agenda, with being a loyalist to President Trump. So we're not going to see her buck the Republican orthodoxy. I'm very sorry to say that just seems utterly unlikely. Trump had some instances of moderation during his first term. You may recall the First Step Act. You may recall the pardoning of Alice Johnson. You may recall that, on economic issues at times, he could be more kind of like, okay, we're not like total free market nuts here, but for the most part, that's what he did. It was deregulation. But now there's no glimmer of hope for him moving anywhere to the left on economic issues. He's got Elon Musk leading the charge in deregulation, just deregulating every single agency that helps regular Americans, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, EPA. He's going after gutting the IRS and the Treasury, just totally destroying things. And this is not gonna end well, obviously, but it's also not a sign that he's a moderate. So he's going after the FAA, deregulating the FAA. Not a very good sign when there's plane crashes. Like, just really, the optics of that are not great. So he's got this deregulation on steroids agenda. He's got a tax cut agenda that really does just favor the uber wealthy. And you know what? You might be progressive, you might be moderate, and you might give him credit for how in his first term he signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 that actually did give some tax cuts to the lower and middle class. They were not permanent, but the tax cuts for the uber wealthy were permanent. And those tax cuts for the middle and lower class, they were actually going to expire, and his goal was to get them to expire under a Democratic president so that middle class and lower class people would see their taxes go up under the Democratic president and go, I don't like that. That's really bad. The Democrats raise my taxes. These tax and spend communists just want to come for my money, and I'm struggling to get by, and they're trying to take my money. So it's strategic with him. The instances in which he does show some sort of moderation, they are all strategic. Some of it remains to be seen, but yeah, abortion, that's another issue. So he's talked about we got to leave it up to the states, which is really not a moderate stance when Roe versus Wade was just overturned. So he's saying, yeah, states should feel free to ban it if they want. It's not the most far right position, but the most far right position, not having that, I mean, that's a low bar. The most far right position is we're going to do a national abortion ban, and he's not in favor of that. And I feel like he has to say he's not in favor of that for his own popularity. That would rile up women voters, men who are pro-choice, and it would lead to some massive electoral defeats in the midterms, and it would be a massive albatross for the 2028 Republican nominee. He probably saw in 2022 that there was this issue of Roe versus Wade being overturned in that June. So the 2022 election happened just 4 months after Roe versus Wade was overturned. It was fresh in Americans' minds, and they voted based on that. They voted for pro-choice candidates. They voted against Trumpian candidates. They recognized that Trump appointed the Supreme Court justices, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Barrett, who lied their butts off saying they wouldn't overturn Roe versus Wade. They got onto the Supreme Court. They voted to overturn it, and people did not like that. But in 2024, unfortunately, that sort of energy had worn off. People were not that animated about it. People were more animated about prices. And they're like, yeah, whatever, Roe's gone. Let's just vote Democratic, maybe, something like that. Or some of them didn't even vote. Low voter turnout was not a good thing in 2024. So Trump realizes this electoral scene that looks a little bit more favorable toward abortion. And I think that's one area in which he doesn't go as far as possible. But saying, I'm not going to sign a national abortion ban, it's like, okay, that's cold comfort. That's cold comfort when it's hard right politics on every other issue. The Greenland thing, the Canada thing, the Panama Canal thing. I mean, this is just stuff that we didn't get that under the Bush administration. And what's especially frustrating about Trump is that people will pretend that he marks something notoriously different from George W. Bush. Like, just look at this. He's strikingly different. He's not a neocon. We're not doing same old like Bush, Obama, and Biden. We're doing new Trump foreign policy, America first. But, I mean, this is just, he's getting involved in the rest of the world. His policy necessarily involves getting involved in the rest of the world. Denmark, he did not rule out using military intervention against Denmark to get Greenland. Why on earth is he so ambitious to get Greenland all of a sudden? Why on earth are we so focused on the Panama Canal when we gave that back to them in the 1970s? Why now? And why do his supporters get so riled up about it? They think, oh yeah, it's cool. Yeah, no, he's standing up for America. When if Kamala Harris or George W. Bush called for something like that, they would say, that's neocon garbage, No wonder Dick Cheney endorsed her. So it's very frustrating hearing people try to cloak Trump in this aura of like, oh, he's a mixed bag. He's not just far right on every issue. I mean, he's not far right on literally every issue, but on most issues, he is the most far right president we've had in modern history. And yet people like Jimmy Dore are so eager to rebrand him as someone who bucks the orthodoxy. So, no, I mean, we've got Kash Patel, we've got lunatics in his administration who are just hell-bent on being loyal to him, hell-bent on deregulating the very institution which is supposed to regulate. Look at the EPA. He appointed Lee Zeldin, someone who, do you think at all of Lee Zeldin when you think of someone who's good on environmental regulation? No, you do not. This random guy from New York, this random guy in the House, yeah, he's going to help reduce greenhouse gases. It's all just deregulatory nonsense, pandering to big business interests. So the next time you see someone say, Trump is he's a bit more moderate, actually, he's a centrist, tell them what I just told you. Show them this video. Lay out the points that I made. because the points that I made are based in history, you know, looking at the first administration and evaluating, okay, the first administration, they were a little more moderate than this one, but this administration, I mean, what he's doing is very careful, very careful. You know, it's all calculated to aid the business interests. There is speculation even, and some of it is substantiated, that he's trying to crash the economy on purpose. You know, David Pakman has talked about this, crash the economy on purpose in order to allow mass privatization, allow the government, you know, basically to just privatize everything, allow uber wealthy oligarchs to take everything over. What on earth is moderate about that? And people talk about George W. Bush, and, you know, I just don't hear people saying George W. Bush is the most far-right president in history these days, thanks to Trump. People went after him all the time during his administration, but in some ways he was the more moderate guy that we could have seen in Trump. You know, he talked about climate change being a big issue, whereas Trump doesn't really do that. Bush obviously deregulated, but he wasn't a total lunatic. He wasn't out to lunch on the issue of climate change. He did Medicare Part D. He expanded community health centers. Trump is not doing well on that issue. In fact, he's reversing some of George W. Bush's progress. So anyone who tries to argue, oh, Trump is anything less than a really hard right guy, to put it bluntly, they're doing a disservice to the marketplace of ideas. And I know that's a very goofy term, but the marketplace of ideas is harmed by people who purport to be centrists and say they're voting for Trump, people who say, oh yeah, Trump is moderate. But I don't think that he's going to continue to do any more moderate stuff. I think that saying I'm not going to sign a national abortion ban and appointing Lori Chavez DeRemer is the most moderate thing we're going to get from him in this presidency. I think it's going to continue to be hard right policies. Cutting food stamps, cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, attaching special requirements to food stamps. I just don't see any sign of moderation. Will the midterms teach him a lesson? I just don't know. I don't think so. I think he'll take all the wrong lessons away. Let's think about this, and let's end on this. When the Democrats lost this election, they started thinking, what could we have done better? They were introspective. They thought about their messaging. They thought about how they needed to talk about the economy more. They thought about how Kamala Harris could have differentiated herself from Joe Biden more, and those are all valid points. Did Republicans do the same thing after 2020? No, they didn't. They doubled down. They ran the same guy again. The same guy using a more absurd, less moderate, even more far-right strategy than before. In 2020, he was bad. His 2024 version, even more insane, even more far-right. They just doubled down on it, and they'll keep doubling down. Will the 2028 nominee be more moderate than Trump? It's possible. It's possible, since it won't be Trump and he's a really far-right guy. But it's also possible they're more extreme. It is. They double down. They just double down. They say, well, last election Trump won, so I have permission, I have a mandate to run an even more far-right campaign. We shall see. But right now, I think there's very little evidence, if any, to suggest that Trump will be more moderate going forward. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. This has been the More is the Merrier. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.